Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Reapyron, and today we're going to be doing another bracket fight list. This one is for the Killing Floor 2 Firebug Weapons, which have been assorted randomly by this program. I just picked them and then threw them all in here. So we're going to be going through, talking about each of them, and then pitting them head to head and picking which one I think is a better option. This is solely based on my opinion, so if your opinion differs, that's cool. Let's begin with the Spitfires versus the Scorcher. Now, both these weapons are very good for doing ground fire. They don't weigh very much. I think they actually weigh the same if you have two Spitfires. I think two Spitfires weigh the same as one Scorcher, although one Scorcher will weigh less if you fully upgrade them, because every time you upgrade the Spitfires, except for the first time, counts as 2 additional weight being added. So you go from 4 weight up to 8 weight, I believe, at max, and the Scorcher, I think you'll go up to 6? I think it's just 6. It's not that heavy. The primary fire of the Spitfires travel kind of slow. They do good damage per shot. The floor fires are really strong with them. If you're running larger magazines, you can have 24 shots with them, which is really strong as well. They actually scale quite well with upgrades, and they are very good early on into the match and even later on into the match. The Scorcher is in somewhat of a similar position, where its primary fire will do direct fire damage, and it will do more damage than the Spitfire. You can also fire at the secondary fire, which can hit targets doing less damage than the primary fire, but leaving ground fires behind it. Both of these weapons make really good secondaries. With upgrades, I believe the Scorcher doesn't really scale as well as the Spitfires do. I believe they scale better, and you get a lot more ammunition with the Spitfires than you do with the Scorcher. Now, the Scorcher, you're supposed to pace yourself over time and do damage with just the floor fires more or less at the secondary fire, or hit enemies directly with the primary fire and wait to deal damage for it. But I find myself just spamming it the same way I do with most of Firebug's weapons, and I think the Spitfires are a better spam weapon than the Scorcher is. I'm going to give this round to the Spitfire, but the Scorcher is a good contender. We have the Scorcher here twice. Maybe I put this one on here twice, or maybe it just auto-filled twice because there wasn't enough things here to be the bracket. So I guess I'm going to pick Microwave Gun, since we've already talked about the Scorcher, and we don't really want to have it up against the same exact thing again. We'll come back to the Microwave Gun once it gets around to it. That was kind of weird. Alright, up next we have the Husk Cannon versus the Incinerary Rifle. The Husk Cannon will do more damage when it's fully powered up than the Incinerary Rifle will, even with its grenades. Both can start floor fires, both can catch enemies on fire pretty easily. Both are kind of spammable towards small enemies. I would say the Incendiary Rifle is generally better against small enemies because the grenade has some use, as well as the Assault Rifle is just really strong. Going with larger magazines with both these is a pretty good option too. You get a lot of shots with the Incendiary Rifle that way, and you can use it the same way you use the M16. The M16 is a good weapon. This is also a good weapon. Both these scale alright with upgrades. The Incendiary Rifle does weigh less than the Scorcher, and I would say that the Incendiary Rifle is a better secondary than the Husk Cannon is. The Husk Cannon definitely makes for a good primary, and you can take both these weapons in combination, and they will work quite well. So I think for this one, I'm going to give it to the Husk Cannon. But the Incendiary Rifle is a good choice too. And like I said, they can be good in combination. Up next, we have the Flamethrower versus the Dragon's Breath. Both these weapons are pretty good for crowd control. They don't particularly do well against large Zeds, but a lot of Firebug's weapons don't, especially the damage over time ones are the ones that rely more on damage over time. So the Flamethrower will potentially do more damage per second. At least it'll do more constant damage per second, because you can just hold down the trigger and keep blowing fire on enemies. It does weigh less, and it does cost more than the Dragon's Breath. The Dragon's Breath is really good on Firebug, especially if you want to take larger magazines where you have 12 shots in it, so you don't have to reload that often. It works fantastic against any small enemies. It does very well with ground fire. The Dragon's Breath is better against large enemies than the Flamethrower is. The Flamethrower is going to take much longer, and you're going to have to rely on Heat Wave as well as floor fire to deal the most damage and just to keep you safe with it. Both these weapons are pretty good. And a while ago, I probably would have given this one to the Flamethrower, but I find myself using the Flamethrower less and less. I think it's mostly because it's somewhat at an awkward weight, and I find it better just to go with a Tier 2 weapon or multiple Tier 2 weapons with Firebug, and then simply save up for whatever weapon I pretty much want to use, and then keep one of those Tier 2s. So that's usually the Dragon's Breath or the Spitfires, and then switching one of them out for something like the Helios Rifle, or the Husk Cannon, or the Microwave Gun, or the Thermite Bore. So I don't find myself taking the flamethrower all that often. That being said, it's still a really good option, and it's still one of the best crowd control weapons in the game. I think I'm going to give this one to the Dragon's Breath, though, because I think it offers up a bit more, mostly in its weight, more so than the Flamethrower does. Flamethrower kind of sits at an awkward weight, whereas the Trench Gun, or the Dragon's Breath, doesn't. Alright, now back to the Microwave Gun and the Spitfires. So the Spitfires definitely weigh less, they definitely cost less. You get potentially more damage per second out of them than the Microwave Gun. It depends on what enemies you're fighting and how many enemies are running across your floor fires. Both these can spawn floor fires, which is a good thing. The Microwave Gun has an interesting secondary fire where it fires out what counts as an explosion as well as microwave damage towards enemies, so it works very well against Flesh Pounds and Scrakes. Its primary fire also works very well against Flesh Pounds and Scrakes. You do have to get a little bit close to use it because you're most likely going to be using its primary fire for the majority of your damage, and then using its secondary fire more as a way to keep enemies away from you or just to explode a bunch of small enemies. Microwaves do really high damage towards any Zeds holding metal, which is really any of the large and medium Zeds. Not so well against the small Zeds, but you have floor fires, so the Microwave Gun does weigh a lot though, and it does limit you on what you can take. Now you could take both these weapons in combination, and that would work perfectly fine too. I think for this one I'm going to give it once again to the Spitfire. I think the Spitfire is a better overall weapon and a weapon you can make more use of. It has more flexibility than the Microwave Gun, although the Microwave Gun is very good at fighting large Zeds, and that can be somewhat of an issue for Firebug, but not as much anymore. Up next we have the Husk Cannon or the Dragon's Breath. Both of these weapons are quite good. You'll do more damage per shot, at least with a charged up shot from the Husk Cannon. You probably have better wave control and small Zed control with the Dragon's Breath, although they're both fairly comparable. Dragon's Breath does weigh less, it also costs less. Cost we're not factoring hugely into these. These work well in combination as well. I do like taking this combo. The Dragon's Breath as well as the Husk Cannon both benefit from larger tanks. They also just benefit more for going for damage. Both can spawn floor fires. I think the floor fires from the Dragon's Breath are a bit better than the Husk Cannon, because to get a real good floor fire with the Husk Cannon, you're likely charging up your shot. And if you're doing that, you're going for more direct damage, whereas the Dragon's Breath, you can put out more floor fires faster. But both of them are good at doing it. The Husk Cannon does weigh more. This one is actually pretty difficult here. I think I'm going to go with the Dragon's Breath here, but it is very close. It's a toss-up between flexibility and power. So I think I'm going to pick flexibility. This one's also a difficult choice. This is the Spitfires versus the Dragon's Breath. The Dragon's Breath will do more damage per shot. It will likely do less damage per second, and it reloads slower than the Spitfires do. The Spitfires do reload faster, as well as you get more shots with them, and you can set up potentially more floor fire, which could lead to more damage per second, at least for crowds. Neither of these weapons are fantastic against large enemies, but the Dragon's Breath is going to be better against them than the Spitfires will be. Both these weapons cost the same. Both these weapons weigh about the same, especially when you're counting up upgrades. This one I could honestly say is more personal preference than anything, because I could see people liking the more power of the Dragon's Breath, as well as the need to pump it every time that you need to fire it. That isn't a huge deal with the Dragon's Breath on Firebug, because the floor fires make up for it, and you're almost never at a situation where, shooting faster with it would have made a huge difference, like it could have on something like Support or even Survivalist. It's not bad on either of those classes either. The Spitfires, you get more rate of fire and more potential damage per second, but less heavy target damage. I think for this one, I'm going to go with the Spitfire, although it's very close between that and the Dragon's Breath. Alright, moving to the other side, we have another really tough matchup right away, which is the Helios Rifle versus the Thermite Bore. Both these weapons are incredibly good and what I would consider top tier weapons for Firebug currently. The Helios Rifle acts like an assault rifle that deals microwave damage to enemies, which is fantastic. It completely shreds any of the large enemies. It completely destroys EDRs. It pretty much single-handedly makes you the best counter to the Matriarch, simply because your whole team can be fighting the Matriarch while you're just clearing out all the EDRs with this weapon. It makes it incredibly easy. Large capacity magazines help this a lot. Having 80 rounds in an assault rifle is very good. It has very nice sights. It is a tier 5 weapon, so it is the most expensive, but it only weighs 8, so it is still very flexible with other weapons, and you can actually take both these weapons in combination. which that combo is really scary to pretty much everything. The thermite bore, I believe, does more damage per shot. It also counts as explosion damage, which is good. It can start up floor fires that last quite a while. The Helios rifle can't start up floor fires, but it's more of a direct damage weapon. Whereas the thermite bore is both a direct damage weapon as well as a damage over time weapon. The explosives with it are very good against flesh pounds because they're weak to explosives. They're very good against robots. They're also weak to explosives and don't particularly care for fire. This is strong against rioters too. They don't like fire either, or explosions, because that can blow off their armor. So it's a good combination there. It doesn't weigh very much. It only weighs 7, which is quite good for a tier 4 weapon, and honestly, I'm surprised they kept it at 7. I'm really glad that they did, but I'm surprised that they did. Thermite bore is incredibly powerful right now. It's, for anybody who hasn't tried it, it's the seal squeal, but for fire. And large capacity magazines also help with this. You have 12 rounds in it then. Both these weapons are really good, and it's really hard to pick between the two of them. I think for this, I'm going to go with the Helios rifle. But the thermite bore is very, very close, and I think this is probably the closest matchup in the game. If these were on opposite sides, I'm assuming both of these would probably be at the end. Alright, up next we have the MAC-10 versus the Cock and Burn. Now, the MAC-10 actually works quite well on Firebug. It's fairly cheap, it does good damage per second, it can do good damage over time thanks to its fire. It can't spawn floor fires, which is alright. It makes for a great backup weapon or a third weapon for Firebug because it is so lightweight. You get a large capacity magazine because if you go with the high capacity fuel tanks, you get a 64 round magazine, I believe, with it, which is very nice. It's also very good in Z time if you're running Pyromaniac. A lot of these weapons are really good in Z time with Pyromaniac. The Cock and Burn is your starting weapon and will probably do more damage per second against the enemies that you're hitting with it, but it is going to be less effective at range. The MAC-10 obviously wins in range against the Cock and Burn. The MAC-10 is also lighter weight than the Cock and Burn. The Cock and Burn also benefits from a larger magazine as well as higher damage with it. It doesn't benefit as much for perks like Pyromaniac, but those benefit weapons that do higher damage per shot. I think for this one I'm going to give it to the MAC-10. The Cock and Burn is a really strong early game weapon, and it can get you through quite a few waves. If you want to save up for a tier 3 or a tier 4 weapon, you actually don't even need to buy any of your tier 2 weapons with Firebug. You can just keep using the Cock and Burn and just keep buying fuel for it and build yourself up to something like the Fire M16, or even, right up to the Helios rifle if you want to just jump right to that. That's not a bad option, but I think the MAC-10 is a better weapon overall than the Cock and Burn, and I would more likely want to have a MAC-10 than the Cock and Burn for most situations. That being said, not all situations. Helios rifle versus the MAC-10. MAC-10 weighs less, but it will do less damage and less damage per second. The MAC-10 also, both these weapons can't start floor fires, which is fine. The MAC-10 is submachine gun damage. Now, it used to be bugged and do shotgun damage, which made it a whole lot better than it was. But the Helios rifle does microwave damage, and the microwaves are incredibly strong against any of the medium and large Zeds. The MAC-10 is generally going to be better against small Zeds, and will likely be able to kill things faster because it does have a higher rate of fire. Both these weapons benefit a lot from the Pyromaniac ability. The Helios rifle definitely has better sights. The Helios rifle is heavier, as I said, though, by, I think, double. I think the MAC-10 weighs 4 and the Helios rifle weighs 8. You can combine these weapons together and have a pretty strong loadout, though, if you want something for killing small Zeds and killing big Zeds. But this one, I'm going to say, easily goes to the Helios rifle. The Helios rifle is a really powerful weapon. And then our last matchup is the Spitfires versus the Helios rifle. The Spitfires will weigh less until they're fully upgraded, and then they weigh the same as the Helios rifle. That being said, the Spitfires are more flexible, though, to fit into slots. They don't weigh as much. They can do more damage per second, I would say, to crowds. Not so much to large Zeds, though, because you can spawn so many floor fires with them. They benefit from the higher capacity magazines. Both of these weapons do. They also benefit just from the straight damage that the weapons do. You are doing better against large Zeds with the Helios rifle as well as any of the medium Zeds because you have microwave damage as opposed to fire damage. And I think that kind of pushes it in the Helios rifle's favor. I'm going to say that the Helios rifle is probably the best weapon for Firebug, but there is quite a few contenders. like the Dragon's Breath and the Spitfires for early waves and even as backup weapons are incredibly strong. Weapons like the MAC-10 are great backup weapons, and weapons like the Husk Cannon, well, the Husk Cannon and the Thermite Bore are also incredibly powerful. This was a really fun one to do. I don't know why it copied the Scorcher twice. That's a bit weird, but it did. So maybe it's just because of the amount of weapons that I put in here. Maybe I accidentally put the same file in here twice. I'm not entirely sure about that. Either way, it kind of worked out because we at least had an even amount of matchups then. Thank you guys so very much for watching this. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you guys did and you're not subscribed, be sure that you get subscribed. That way you get notifications whenever I post any of these videos. Thanks to all the special supporters over here that support the channel financially through Patreon and through the YouTube membership program. And thanks everybody who does that. I hope you guys have a great day, and I will talk to all of you guys next time. Till then, stay cool and bye!